Chosen one, stop. Not pause, stop. Put down whatever you're doing. Because what you are about to hear, God did not allow to reach you by accident. This is not another video. Do not treat it like one. This message was locked inside eternity with your name written on it, and today, heaven cracked it open. I need to ask you something. And I need you to answer it honestly, not to me, but to yourself. How long have you been waiting? How many mornings did you wake up and check still nothing? How many nights did you pray the same prayer, into the same silence, and wonder if God had somehow misplaced your address? You watched others receive the very thing you bled for in secret. You sat in the pew. You stood in faith. You wept in rooms nobody saw. And somewhere deep, hidden, almost too ashamed to admit a question formed that shook you to your bones. Did God forget me? Hear me right now with every cell in your body. He did not forget you, not for a single second, not one breath of one day. But here is the truth that is about to rearrange your entire life. The truth the enemy has been desperate to keep you from hearing. God was not withholding from you. He was holding it for you. There is a difference, and that difference is everything. A locked box, not empty full, held in a hand too strong, too wise, too holy to open it one moment too soon. Because if he had released it 5 years ago, you would have collapsed under the weight of what you were begging for. The blessing would have become your breaking. What if your closed doors were not rejection, but protection? What if the very thing you cried yourself to sleep over was being guarded by God himself until you were strong enough to carry it without being destroyed? Stay with me, because before this is over, you are going to understand your delay in a light so holy you will drop to your knees in gratitude for every single year you had to wait. If this already feels like God is reading your hidden season out loud, type right now, "He was holding it for me." Let me sit with you for a moment. Not preach at you, not rush past you, just sit with you, right where you are, in the quiet of this morning, in the weight of this season, because I think you have been carrying something for a very long time. And most people in your life, they never asked about it. They never saw it. They never knew how heavy it had become. But God sees it. And today, he wants to name it out loud. Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, wrote it plainly in Proverbs 13:12. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. Not discouraged, not disappointed. Sick. That is not poetry. That is a diagnosis. Because there is a specific kind of pain that only comes from waiting for something God himself placed inside you and watching the years go by without it arriving. It does not hit you all at once. It sneaks in, slow, like a lamp that burns lower and lower, still lit, but barely. You are still believing. But the believing has gotten quiet, private, almost too tender to touch. You remember when you used to pray with fire, when you would lay your requests before God and rise from your knees certain something was moving. But somewhere between that first prayer and today, the fire became an ember. The certainty became a question, and the question became something you stopped saying out loud because you were embarrassed to still be asking. Can I be honest with you? There are people in your life who stopped believing years ago, and nobody notices because they smile on Sunday. They nod at the right moments. They say God is good at just the right volume. But alone, in their kitchen at 5 in the morning, in that chair where nobody can see them, they have gone silent before God. Not because they stopped loving him, but because hope, repeated and delayed enough times, turns into something a person can barely hold anymore. Like a prayer worn smooth from being held too long, the words still there, but the grip almost gone. Dear one, if that is you, I need you to hear this. That is not weakness. That is not faithlessness. That is the wound of a person who never let go. I know what some of your days have looked like. Maybe you buried a spouse and the loneliness that came after was bigger than any word for it. Maybe the children grew distant, and the house got quiet in a way that no amount of television can fill. Maybe the medical bills stacked up while the answers stayed away. Maybe the body started failing and the fear moved in quietly, relentlessly, and you have been fighting it with a faith that sometimes feels like the last candle in a dark room. Maybe you watched someone 30 years younger step into the exact opportunity you had prayed over for a decade, and you smiled for them. You genuinely did, but in the car on the way home, you whispered the question you were almost too afraid to finish. God, did you mean me? Or did I misunderstand you all along? That question does not make you a bad Christian. That question makes you human, chosen, anointed, deeply loved, and human. And God is not offended by it. He has heard it 10,000 times, from 10,000 of his most faithful ones. He heard it from David, crying in a cave, from Hannah, weeping in the temple, from Elijah, collapsed under a juniper tree, a mighty prophet, begging to die because the waiting had become unbearable. These were not people short on faith. These were people long on endurance, and the endurance itself had become its own kind of suffering. Here is what nobody tells you about long seasons of waiting. The hardest part is not the waiting itself. The hardest part is what the waiting does to your picture of God. When the ground looks dead year after year, when the winter stretches on so long you cannot remember what spring smelled like, the enemy creeps in and whispers his most dangerous lie. The ground is not resting, it is finished. But winter ground is not dead ground. It is secretly, quietly, invisibly storing life. The roots go deeper in winter than any other season. Things are happening underground that no human eye can measure. And the fact that you cannot see it does not mean nothing is growing. If you know what it feels like to keep believing when nobody around you understands why, type right now, I stayed. Because staying is not small. Staying, when everything in the natural screamed at you to walk away, that is one of the most sacred acts a human soul can perform before God. Your heartbreak in the waiting does not prove you lacked faith. It proves you were still holding on long after most people would have let go. And that changes everything about what God is about to do next. Because a faith that has never been tested by delay is a faith that has never been proven. But yours has been proven in the silence, in the dark, in the years nobody clapped for you. The question is not whether God noticed. The question is, what has he been building in secret while you were holding on? Now I need you to stay right here with me, because what I am about to teach you is one of the most important distinctions you will ever learn in your life of faith. And if you miss this, you will spend the rest of your years misreading God. Here is the truth most believers never get told. There are two kinds of no. Two, not one. And they can feel identical on the surface. Same sting, same silence, same locked door, same hollow morning after. But they are not the same. They are not even close to the same. One comes from the pit of hell, the other comes from the throne of heaven. And knowing the difference, truly knowing it, is going to rewrite every painful chapter of your story. The enemy's no has one purpose only: to bury you. When the enemy closes a door, he does not close it to redirect you. He closes it to destroy your belief. He wants you to walk away from that shut door whispering to yourself, I was never good enough. I waited too long. God must have chosen someone else. That is not redirection. That is assassination, the slow kind. The kind that does not kill your body but murders your faith one disappointment at a time. The enemy's no comes wrapped in shame. It whispers you are too old, too broken, too far behind, too much, not enough. It replays your failures at 2 inches the morning when the house is quiet. It points at the person who got what you prayed for and says, see, not you, never you. That voice is a liar, and it has been lying to you for years. But now God's no does not come from rejection. It comes from protection. When God closes a door, he is not turning his back on you. He is standing between you and something that would have wrecked you. He sees the freight train you cannot see. He knows the structural damage hidden behind the wall that looks like a door. He understands what you would have become if that relationship had continued, if that opportunity had opened, if that path had led where you thought it was going. Think about the red light at the railroad crossing. You sit there, frustrated, engine running, minutes ticking by. You cannot see around the bend. You cannot hear what is coming. And then the train roars through at 80 miles an hour, 3 feet in front of your bumper. That red light was not the enemy blocking your morning. That red light was God saving your life. I want you to think right now about a door that broke your heart, a job you did not get, a relationship that collapsed, a plan you had prayed over for years that fell apart at the worst possible moment. You called it failure. Heaven called it a rescue. Think about Joseph, 17 years old, a God-given dream burning in his chest like fire, and then everything fell apart in ways that made no human sense. His own brothers stripped him, threw him in a pit, and sold him into slavery, falsely accused, imprisoned, forgotten. Every door slammed shut. Every year stretched longer than the last. From the outside, it looked like abandonment. It looked like God had gone completely silent on a young man who had done nothing wrong. But Genesis 50-20 pulls back the curtain on the entire story. Joseph looked at his brothers, the very men who betrayed him, and said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." What looked like abandonment was architecture. What felt like a dead end was a divine detour planned long before Joseph ever arrived at it. Every pit, every prison, every year of silence, God was not absent. God was building something so precise, so specific, so perfectly engineered that no shortcut could have produced it. And now I need you to get personal with me for just a moment. That marriage that fell apart, what if staying in it would have slowly erased every calling God placed inside you? That job you did not get 15 years ago, what if the culture inside that company would have compromised the very character God was building in you? That city you could not move to, what if the life waiting for you there would have pulled you away from the exact people God needed you to stay close to? Some prayers were not denied because they were wrong. They were denied because they were premature. The bridge was not closed because God wanted you stranded. The bridge was closed because the structure was not safe yet, and that applies to you just as much as it applies to the bridge. A child screams when a parent will not hand over the car keys. The child cannot understand why. All the child feels is the burning of being told no. But the parent sees what the child cannot: an underdeveloped judgment, a dangerous road, a speed that would be fatal. You were that child, and God was that parent. And the keys you were screaming for, they were not ready for your hands yet, and your hands were not yet ready for them. Here is the climax of everything I just told you. The enemy's no is designed to bury you alive and leave you there. God's no is designed to bring you back alive, refined, unbreakable, at exactly the right time. One closes you off, the other holds you close. One is a grave, the other is a vault. And the difference between a grave and a vault is not the darkness inside, it is what happens when the right moment comes and the door finally opens. Before we move forward, I want you to do one thing. Think of one door that shattered you, one no that left a scar you have carried for years. Hold it in your mind right now, because what I am about to show you next is going to reveal something that will make you see that moment, not as your worst chapter, but as the moment God moved heaven itself to protect what he had already promised you. The vault is about to open, and what comes out of it will be worth every single year you spent in the dark. Close your eyes for just a moment. I want you to picture something. Imagine the hand of God, vast, ancient, unshakable, and resting in the hollow of that hand, a seed, small, hidden, wrapped in silence, not forgotten. not discarded, protected. Now open your eyes, because that seed, that precious, guarded, heaven-breathed seed, is your promise. And the reason you couldn't see it, couldn't touch it, couldn't hold it, is the very reason it's still alive today. Here is a truth that will undo every lie the enemy has whispered to you in the dark. Some blessings don't fail because they were fake. They fail because they were released too early. Think about that. Really sit with it. A seed planted in frozen ground doesn't grow, not because it lacks life, but because the earth hasn't been made ready to receive it. You don't bury a seed in January and scream at the soil in February because nothing has emerged. The problem isn't the seed. The problem isn't even the gardener. The problem is impatience with a process that has its own sacred timeline. Proverbs 13:12 says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life." Not a flower, not a shrub, a tree of life. Trees don't grow in a week. Trees don't grow in a year. Trees grow in decades of unseen labor roots, pushing 40 feet underground before a single branch ever stretches toward the light. And beloved, your promise was always meant to be a tree, not a weed, that sprouts fast and dies faster. So let me ask you the question that's been burning in heaven long before it reached your spirit tonight. What exactly had to grow in you before God could safely release what he was holding for you? Think honestly. 5 years ago, were you ready? Were you ready to steward the marriage you prayed for when you were still carrying wounds you hadn't even named yet? Were you ready to manage the financial breakthrough when fear still drove every decision you made? Were you ready to walk in that calling when your ego was still louder than your anointing? If God had answered you then, the way you demanded to be answered, you would have mismanaged the miracle. You would have clutched the blessing so tightly out of desperation, you would have choked the very life out of it. You would have exposed it to the wrong people, at the wrong time, in the wrong season, and the enemy would have found it, named it, and destroyed it before it ever had the chance to become what it was always created to be. God didn't delay your promise to punish you. He delayed it to protect it. Think about Abraham. God spoke a promise over that man when he was 75 years old. A son, a nation, a legacy that would outlast empires. And for 25 years, that promise lived in silence, hidden in the hand of a God who never once forgot what he said. Was God slow? Was God distracted? Was God withholding out of cruelty? No. God was growing the roots. He was deepening Abraham's dependence, widening his capacity for faith, stripping away every plan Abraham could manufacture on his own, until the only thing left standing was trust in a God who works in the impossible. And when Isaac finally came at 90 and 100 years old, nobody on earth could take credit. Nobody could say it was timing or circumstance or human effort. It was God. Unmistakably, undeniably God. That is why he made them wait. Not to be cruel, to be clear. Chosen one, hear me now. Your character had to deepen. Your emotional capacity had to widen. Your discernment had to sharpen until you could tell the difference between a God-sent connection and a wolf wearing the face of a blessing. Your dependence on heaven had to mature until you stopped reaching for what you wanted and started trusting the one who holds what you need. Think of a greenhouse in the dead of winter. Outside, frozen ground, bare trees, brutal wind. But inside that greenhouse, behind glass walls that look like nothing from the road, life is exploding in warmth and silence. Roots are forming, stems are strengthening. Something extraordinary is being prepared for the moment the season shifts. You were that greenhouse. While it looked like nothing was happening in your life, while everyone around you seemed to be blooming in the open field, God had you in a controlled environment, tended, watched, intentionally protected from conditions that would have killed what he was cultivating. The violin being tuned makes an uncomfortable sound. The bread rising in darkness looks like nothing but dough. But remove that bread too early and it collapses. You were rising. If you can feel even now, even after everything, that something was quietly growing in you while nothing seemed to be moving around you. Type right now, "He was growing my roots." Because here is the climax of everything I've been building toward in this section, and I need you to receive it with your whole heart. God did not hold it back because you were unworthy. He held it back because He wanted it to survive once it reached you. He was not protecting His promise from you. He was protecting it for you, until you were the kind of soil that could receive it, nurture it, and watch it become the tree of life it was always destined to be. The silence was not rejection. It was gestation. And beloved, the season of gestation is ending. Which means only one question remains now, and it is the most important question of this entire message. If God was growing your roots in the hidden season, what exactly is He about to release now that your foundation is finally strong enough to hold it? Let me ask you something that nobody, not your family, not your pastor, not even your closest friend, has ever had the courage to ask you directly. How many years have you been silently carrying this? Not out loud, not in Sunday morning testimony, but in the private, unwitnessed hours, the 3 a.m. moments when the house was dark and still, and you lay there talking to a God who felt like He had gone completely quiet. How many years did you show up anyway? Because here is the truth that heaven has been waiting to say over your life, and I need every single word of this to land in your spirit like a stone dropped into deep water. Waiting in faith is one of the bravest things a human being can ever do. Not the waiting that's easy, not the waiting with a clear timeline posted on the wall. The brutal kind, the kind where you didn't know if the promise was still real, the kind where you worshipped when you were exhausted, where you chose not to quit when quitting would have been completely understandable, where you kept your faith in one hand and your pain in the other, and somehow you kept walking forward. That was not wasted time. That was war. I want you to think about something. Steel doesn't become steel by sitting in a comfortable room. It gets thrust into fire, extreme, relentless, punishing heat, and it is hammered, pressed, shaped under pressure that would crush anything weaker. And only then does it become something the builder can trust. Wine doesn't become wine by being rushed. It gets sealed in darkness, months, years. The slower the aging, the richer the depth. The longer it's hidden, the more extraordinary it becomes when it finally pours. That is what God has been doing with you. He was not forgetting you in the dark. He was finishing you there. Think about Joseph. Thrown into a pit by his own brothers, sold like merchandise, falsely accused, locked in a prison with no appeal, no advocate, no visible exit. Years, not weeks, years. And the whole time, God said nothing loud enough for Joseph to hear. But here is what Joseph could not see from behind those prison walls. Every single day of that silence, God was building the character a prime minister of Egypt would need to survive power without being corrupted by it. The prison was not punishment. The prison was preparation. Genesis 50-20. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. That word intended, it means God had a deliberate design running beneath the surface of every painful chapter. A blueprint invisible to human eyes but perfectly clear to heaven. Now tell me, does any of that sound familiar to your life? Think about Moses. 40 years in the wilderness. Not 40 days. 40 years. Tending sheep in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but silence and sand, and a calling that must have felt, by year 30, like a dream he had made up. But God was doing something in that wilderness that could not have happened in a palace. He was stripping Moses of every ounce of human pride, every layer of Egyptian entitlement, until what remained was a man so surrendered, so hollow of self, that God's voice could finally fill him completely. Exodus 3-4, Moses, Moses. And he answered, Here I am. 40 years to get to 2 words. Here I am. What has your wilderness been building toward that you cannot fully see yet? Think about David. anointed king as a teenager, still sleeping in caves and running from Saul a decade later. Every cave was dark, every night was cold, every morning began with the same unanswered question: when, God, when? But in those caves, David wrote the Psalms. Not in the palace, not on the throne, in the caves. The most powerful prayers in all of human history were forged in the worst conditions imaginable. And you who have been praying in your own private caves, God has been recording every single word. Psalm 56:8. You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. Not one tear was wasted. Not one silent night went unwitnessed. And then there is Anna, 84 years old, widowed young, spent decades in the temple, praying, fasting, worshipping with no fanfare, no platform, no audience, just faithfulness, day after day, in a season most people would have abandoned 30 years earlier. And when the moment finally came, when baby Jesus was carried through those temple doors, it was not the young and ambitious who recognized the Messiah. It was Anna, because only eyes sharpened by decades of faithful waiting could see what others in that room completely missed. Your years did not disqualify you, they qualified you. Do you understand now what those years were actually building inside you? Not just patience, unshakable, proven, battle-tested patience that no trial can collapse. Not just humility, the kind that can only come from years of carrying a calling without the applause that should have come with it. Not just resilience, the kind that looks the grave in the face and says, I've survived worse than this. And something even deeper, a nearness to God that people who had easy roads will spend the rest of their lives trying to find. You found it in the fire. You found it in the silence. You found it on the floor of your bedroom at 3 inches the morning when nobody else was watching. That is not a small thing. That is everything. Here is what I need you to hear, and I need you to let this settle into your bones. The next season coming for your life will require exactly the version of you that all this waiting created. Not who you were 10 years ago, not who you wished you had become faster. The you that was forged in the silence, the you that learned to trust God in the dark. The you that carried faith without applause and still showed up. That is the person the next chapter needs. God was building in secret what your next season will lean on in public. Not eventually. Now. The construction is complete. The bridge has been reinforced beneath the surface. The roots run deeper than anyone standing above ground could possibly imagine. If you are still here, after everything that should have broken you, if you are still breathing, still believing, still watching this message right now, type this in the comments. The waiting formed me, not as a habit, as a declaration. Let heaven record it. Let every angel assigned to your life hear it clearly. And if this word is strengthening you right now, share it with somebody who is tired of calling their delay a failure. Because someone you love is about to give up on a promise that is 3 days from its resurrection. Don't let them quit on a Saturday. You have just been honored for what you endured. Now it is time to understand what exactly God has been holding and why the moment He opens His hand will be unlike anything you have ever witnessed in your entire life. Before God gives you what was delayed around you, He starts with something far more sacred. He starts with you. Not your bank account, not your relationships, not the door that wouldn't open for 15 years. You, the real you, the one that got buried. I need to ask you something that might cut deeper than anything you've heard today. When did you start making yourself smaller? Think about it honestly. When did you stop saying what you actually meant? When did you start laughing at things that weren't funny just to keep the peace? When did you begin editing your thoughts before they left your mouth? Not out of wisdom, but out of fear. When did you stop taking up the space God assigned to you? Because somewhere along the road after the rejections, the disappointments, the people who walked away, the rooms that went cold when you spoke your truth, you made a decision. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, almost invisible. You decided it was safer to be less visible, less bold, less you, and you called it humility. But chosen one, God calls it a wound. Jeremiah 1-5. God speaking, not man. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Before fear got to you, God knew the full version of you. Before that person made you feel like too much, God already designed you to be exactly that much. Before the rejection, the silence, the quiet shrinking, there was a you that God authored. Fearless, deep, luminous, unedited. And here is what breaks heaven's heart. You traded that person in to make other people comfortable. That smaller version of you was survival. It was never your identity. Think of a dimmer switch. The light didn't disappear, it was turned down. The electricity was always there, full voltage, full power, just suppressed by grief, by loss, by years of being told, sometimes with words, sometimes with silence, that your full brightness was inconvenient. Think of a painting hidden under decades of soot, dulled, darkened, almost unrecognizable. But strip away the layers and the masterpiece was there the entire time, untouched beneath the surface, waiting to be seen again. That is you. And God, right now, in this season, in this very moment, He is not just restoring your blessings. He is restoring His original work. Let me speak to someone specific right now. You are the person who became quieter than you were meant to be because every time you spoke with full conviction, someone in the room shifted uncomfortably. So you learned to whisper what God told you to declare. You are the person who stopped sharing your spiritual depth because the people closest to you didn't understand it, and you grew tired of feeling like a stranger at your own dinner table. You are the person who apologized constantly for taking up space, for having needs, for feeling things deeply, for knowing things in your spirit that you couldn't always explain in a sentence. You pruned yourself, repeatedly, until you fit into a shape that wasn't yours. And now years later you don't fully recognize yourself. And you've been asking God for a breakthrough. But God has been asking you a question far more urgent. What have you been shrinking to protect? Because here's the divine truth that will rearrange everything. What God is about to release into your life cannot flow through a reduced version of you. The blessing needs a full vessel. The assignment needs your full voice. The people God is sending to you, they don't need the edited version. They need the restored version. A house cannot be filled if half its rooms are locked. God is walking through the hallways of who you are right now, and He is opening doors you sealed shut years ago. Rooms you abandoned. Rooms that hold your real laugh, your real fire, your real depth, your real authority. He is turning the dimmer switch all the way back up. And this is where the breakthrough truly begins. Not with an open door in the natural, but with an open door inside you. Speaking honestly again, even when your voice trembles. Standing calmly in rooms that used to make you disappear. No longer apologizing for your spiritual depth, your calling, your convictions. Returning fully, completely, without apology to your God-shaped self. That is what release looks like. If you are exhausted, truly exhausted, from living as the reduced version of yourself. If some part of you recognized its own story in these words and felt something rise up that hasn't moved in years, type this right now, right in the comments. God, restore the real me, not the survival version, not the version built for other people's comfort, the original. The one He wrote before the world got to you. Because before God restores what was delayed around you, He begins by restoring who got buried inside you. And once that restoration is complete, once you are standing in the fullness of who He made you to be, what comes next is going to shock you. Because the promise was never just for your life. It was designed to move through your restored identity and touch every person God has already placed in your path. The real you was never the obstacle. The real you was always the vehicle. Now I need to take you somewhere sacred, Stay with me, because what I am about to say may be the most important thing you hear in this entire message. You have believed for the promise. You have prayed for the promise. You have wept for the promise on your knees, in the dark, alone. But here is the question heaven is asking you right now, and it is going to cut deep. Can you surrender it? Open your Bible to Genesis 22, because this is where everything changes. God had given Abraham the one thing he had waited his entire life to receive: a son, Isaac, the child of the promise, the living proof that God keeps his word. And then God said something that must have felt like the ground vanishing beneath Abraham's feet. Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and offer him as a burnt offering. Genesis 22:2. Read that again slowly. God told Abraham to place the promise on the altar, not the struggle, not the pain, not the years of wilderness. God asked for the treasure, the thing Abraham had waited decades for, the thing that made every year of waiting worth it. And Abraham rose early the next morning and went. Chosen one, let me ask you something that may shake you. What is your Isaac? What is the one thing you are holding so tightly right now that your knuckles have gone white? Is it a person, someone you love so desperately that the fear of losing them keeps you up at night? Is it a dream one you have carried since you were young, one that still burns even after everything tried to put it out? Is it a healing you have been begging God for month after month, prayer after prayer? Is it an outcome, one you have already decided must happen this way, on this timeline, or everything falls apart? Whatever it is, God sees it, and he is asking you the same question he asked Abraham. Do you trust me more than you trust the thing I gave you? Here is the truth that most people never preach because it is too uncomfortable. The greatest barrier standing between you and your breakthrough is not the enemy. It is not your past. It is not your failures. It is your grip. A bird cannot land on a hand that is shaking with desperation, and God cannot place what he has been holding for you into a fist that is still clenching what you already have. A closed hand cannot receive, because it is still gripping yesterday. But hear me carefully, because this is where so many people misunderstand God's heart. He is not asking to take it forever. He is not asking you to give up the dream. He is not asking you to stop believing for the healing. He is not asking you to walk away from the person you love. He is asking one question, and the answer to this question moves heaven. Do you trust me more than the outcome? That is what the altar of Mount Moriah was about. It was never about Isaac's life. It was about Abraham's heart. God needed to know, and Abraham needed to know, that the promise had not become the idol. Genesis 22:12. The angel of the Lord said, "Do not lay a hand on the boy. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son." The moment Abraham's hands opened, heaven moved. The ram appeared in the thicket, provision that was already there, waiting for the moment of full surrender. Think about that. The breakthrough was already present. The answer was already in the thicket. God was not scrambling. He was waiting for the grip to release so the gift could land. And chosen one, your ram is already in the thicket. Your provision, your healing, your open door, your restored relationship, it is already there. But it cannot reach your open hands until you lay your Isaac down. Surrender is not weakness. Do not let the enemy tell you that. Surrender is not giving up. It is not defeat. It is not passivity. Surrender is consecrated trust. It is standing before God with open hands and saying, "I believe you are good enough, wise enough, and loving enough to handle what I cannot." That is not the posture of someone who has lost faith. That is the posture of someone who is about to receive everything. Right where you are right now, I want you to do something. Open your hands physically, palms up, and whisper this: "Lord, I trust you more than the outcome." Say it like you mean it. Say it even if your voice shakes. Say it, especially if your voice shakes. Because what moves heaven is not your demand. What moves heaven is your trust. God often intervenes at the exact moment of full surrender, because surrender proves that the promise is no longer your idol. And the moment it stops being your idol, it is finally safe for God to give it to you. Your open hands are not the end of the story. They are the beginning of the miracle. And what God places in open, surrendered hands, no devil in hell can ever take away. Now I need to talk to you about something that nobody warns you about when God begins to move. Because the breakthrough is not coming alone. When heaven opens a new season over your life, it does not just shift your circumstances, it reorders your circle. And that reordering, for some of you, it is the most painful part of this entire journey. Let me ask you something that might cut deep. Is there someone in your life, someone you love, someone you've known for decades, and lately, every time you leave them, you feel smaller than when you arrived? You feel edited, dimmed, like you had to tuck away the version of you that God has been building just to survive the conversation. You find yourself second-guessing things you were certain about before you walked into that room. You leave the coffee table, the phone call, the family dinner, and something in your chest feels heavier than it should. Chosen one. I need you to hear this with your whole heart. That is not love holding you. That is weight dragging you. Proverbs 27:17 declares, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." Iron, not cotton, not convenience. Iron. The right people in your life do not flatter you into comfort. They do not use you for what you carry. They do not sit in the stands cheering while secretly hoping you don't go too far. The right people sharpen you. They make you more of who God called you to be, not less. And the brutal truth you need to hear today is this. Not everyone who walked with you through the wilderness was assigned to walk with you into the promised land. Think about that for a moment. Some people were given to you for one chapter, not the whole book. They comforted you when you were broken. They sat with you in the pain. They knew your old address by heart, but they were never built to steward your destiny. And that is not a flaw in them. That is simply the reality of divine seasons. Some shoes carry you beautifully through winter, and then the spring comes, and they no longer fit. You did not outgrow them out of arrogance. You outgrew them because you grew. Some branches must be pruned from the tree, not because the branch was bad, but because the tree is being prepared to bear fruit that the branch was never designed to hold. So, here is the question that is going to sit with you long after this video ends. Who in your life keeps pulling you backward into the version of yourself that God is calling you out of? Not with cruelty, sometimes with kindness, sometimes with nostalgia, sometimes with guilt disguised as love. You've changed. You think you're better than us now. You used to be so humble, and you gentle, loyal, deeply loving soul that you are. You shrink back down. You fold yourself back into the old shape because you don't want to hurt anyone. But chosen one, listen to me very carefully. Shrinking yourself to fit someone else's comfort is not humility. It is disobedience. God is not removing people from your life to punish you. He is removing them to protect what He is about to place in your hands. Because what is coming, the promise that has been held in His hands all this time, it requires a circle that can carry the weight of new wine, and old wineskins cannot hold it. Jesus said so Himself, Mark 2:22. New wine, new wineskins, new season, new alignment. Some departures in your life are not cruelty. They are mercy. God, in His sovereign love, is releasing the wrong people out so the right people can come in. The divine connections He has been preparing for this next season, the sharpeners, the builders, the iron-on-iron companions, who will look at your God-given vision and say, "Yes, let's go." They cannot enter a room that is already too crowded with misalignment. Ask yourself right now, honestly, what relationships have quietly become too small for the season God is calling you into? Not toxic, not evil, just too small. Old keys for old doors. And you are standing in front of a door that requires a completely different key. What if that key, that next key, looks like a new person, a new friend, a new mentor, a new spiritual companion who has been prepared by God specifically for this chapter of your story? Because God does not just hold blessings for you, He holds people for you. Right now, if God has been quietly showing you that your circle is shifting, that certain seats are being moved and new ones are being set, do not resist it. Do not chase what He is releasing. Receive what He is sending. Type in the comments right now, Lord, align my relationships. Make it your declaration. Because declaration moves things in the spiritual realm that silence never will. Here is the truth that is going to anchor you as you move forward. Some people are not leaving because your life is falling apart. They are leaving because your next season cannot breathe inside the old room. And the moment that room empties, the moment you stop grieving the space, you are going to look up and see who God was saving that seat for all along. And you will understand why every goodbye was necessary. Because what is walking in it could not walk in until the wrong thing walked out. The pruning is almost finished. The new circle is already in motion. And what God is about to send through the door He just cleared, it will make every loss look like preparation. Chosen one, I need you to hear this next part with everything inside you, because what I am about to describe, you have lived it. You are probably living it right now, and once you understand what it means, you will never panic at it again. Right before your breakthrough, something strange happens. The doubt does not just whisper anymore, it screams. The distractions do not just pull at you, they flood you. The conflict in your relationships, in your finances, in your body, in your mind, it does not calm down. It escalates. And the fatigue, that bone-deep, soul-level exhaustion that makes you want to sit down, close your eyes, and say, I cannot do this anymore. Can I tell you what that is? That is not a sign you are losing. That is a sign you are close. The enemy does not waste heavy artillery on people going nowhere. He does not unleash his most vicious assault on a life that is not threatening him. When hell suddenly gets loud, it is because heaven just got louder. The darkness always intensifies right before the dawn breaks. Not because the night is winning, because the night knows it is almost over. So let me ask you something that is going to shake you. What if your heaviness right now is not proof that you are failing, but proof that the enemy can feel the door moving? What if the warfare you are under is the most backwards confirmation you have ever received? What if the attack itself is the announcement? But I need to warn you about something. Something that has cost more believers their breakthrough than almost anything else. Not every ear is safe for what God has placed inside you. When you are standing at the threshold, when the promise is this close, there is a dangerous temptation to share it too soon, to speak it into rooms that are not ready, to hand a sacred seed to soil that will not protect it. Proverbs 4:23 says, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Guard what God told you, not forever, just until it has roots strong enough that no voice can pull it out. Isaiah 54:17 declares, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. But notice it does not say, no weapon will be formed. It says, no weapon will prosper. The weapon is coming. The attack is real. The opposition is genuine. But it will not win. Now let me take you somewhere. Midnight. A Roman prison. Chains on their wrists. Backs bleeding from a beating they did not deserve. No lawyer. No rescue in sight. No evidence that God heard a single prayer. Paul and Silas, Acts 16, did not collapse at midnight. They sang, not because the chains were gone, not because the doors had opened, not because the situation made any logical sense. They worshipped before the evidence arrived. And do you know what happened? The foundations shook. Every door flew open. Every chain fell off. Not because of their volume, because of their trust. This is what worship really is, chosen one. Worship is not a feeling. It is not a song you sing when life is good and God feels close and everything is going your way. Worship is trust expressed before proof arrives. It is standing in the prison and saying, I do not see the open door yet, but I believe the door is moving. It is lifting your hands in the middle of the storm and declaring, you are still God, you are still faithful, and what you promised, you will perform. That kind of worship does something to the atmosphere around you that no human strategy ever could. It does not just change your mood. It shifts the spiritual climate of the room you are standing in. So right now, chosen one, right now, you are standing at a threshold, and there are only two options before you. You can collapse at the door. You can let the weight of the waiting, the sting of the warfare, the whisper of doubt pull you down to the floor and convince you that the answer is never coming. Or you can open your mouth, right here, right now, in whatever room you are sitting in. You can worship before you see it. You can declare before it arrives. You can sing in your prison until the chains start trembling. Because here is the truth that will carry you through every final test you will ever face. The last battle is never about whether you can wait longer. It is whether you can still worship when the answer is close enough to threaten hell itself. The chains are trembling, chosen one. The door is moving, and heaven is watching to see what you do right now. If you are choosing trust before proof, write it. Say it out loud in the room where you are sitting. I will worship before I see it. Say it like you mean it, because you do. And do not you dare stop now, because what God is about to open in the next part of your story is the very thing that makes every silent night finally make sense. Chosen one, we have traveled far together in this message, and before I release you, I need you to hear this one final time, not as information, as truth that settles into your bones and never leaves. You were not forgotten. You were not behind. Your past did not disqualify you. Your delay was not pointless, and God did not withhold from you. He was holding it until your roots ran deep enough to survive the weight of what He promised, until your spirit was seasoned enough to steward what He prepared, until your timing aligned with heaven's calendar, until your structure could bear the blessing without collapsing under it, until your discernment was sharp enough to recognize the door when it finally opened, until the right people were positioned around you, until you, the real you, had finally surrendered the version of yourself that would have destroyed what God was trying to deliver. That is not punishment, that is love. The most surgical, most intentional, most holy kind of love that exists. Proverbs 3:5 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding." You couldn't understand the delay. You weren't supposed to, because God was building something your understanding couldn't contain yet. Second movement, the final activation. Before we go into prayer, I need you to do 4 things, not someday, this week. First, clear the spiritual clutter, the bitterness, the resentment toward people who moved faster than you, the grudge against the closed doors. Release it. All of it. You cannot carry your promise and your pain in the same hands. Second, write down one scripture that speaks directly to your season, not a list. 1. Put it somewhere you see it every single morning. Let it be the first voice you hear before the world speaks. Third, stop speaking scarcity over your future. Every time you say it's too late, you are agreeing with the enemy and disagreeing with God. Isaiah 43:19 declares, "I am doing a new thing." Do you not perceive it? God is not finished. Stop eulogizing a life that is still breathing. Fourth, every morning, before your feet hit the floor, release your timeline back to God. Just 5 words. Your timing. Not mine. Yes, that is not passivity. That is the most powerful act of faith a human being can perform. Third movement, the prophetic prayer. Pray this with me. Right now, wherever you are, Father God, we come to you not with perfect faith, but with honest hearts. We are grateful, deeply, completely grateful, not just for what you are releasing, but for what you protected us from, for every door you kept shut, for every detour that turned out to be your hand steering, for every season of silence that was actually you, whispering things too sacred for noise. We confess there were moments we doubted you, moments we wondered if you had moved on, moments we stopped praying out loud because hope felt too expensive. Forgive us, Lord. You loved us through every one of those moments anyway. Today, we surrender the timeline, all of it. The 5 years we thought we wasted, the decade we mourned, the dreams we quietly buried because waiting became too heavy. We lay them at your feet, not in defeat, but in trust. We release the old disappointment. We release the names of people who hurt us in the waiting. We release the version of ourselves that wore shame like a second skin. And now, Lord, we receive. We receive restored identity. We receive divine alignment. We receive protection over the promise you have been guarding. We receive peace that makes no logical sense. We receive the courage to believe again, not because circumstances changed, but because you do not change. Bring what is ready, Father, and in your mercy, keep away what is not. In the mighty, matchless name of Jesus. Amen. Final closing charge. Chosen one, look at where you are right now. You stayed. Through every word, every truth, every moment, this message pressed on a wound you didn't know was still open. That kind of attention is not coincidence. That is seeking. And Matthew 7:7 promises, everyone who seeks, finds. So let me leave you with this, not as a suggestion, as a declaration spoken over your life with the full weight of everything I carry. What is for you is still for you. What heaven wrote over your life has not expired. The hand that held the promise is the hand that knows exactly when to open. And when God opens his hand, you will not wonder why it took so long. You will know. You will fall to your knees and understand with every fiber of your being that it could not have come one single day sooner. The morning is here. The storm is ending. The sealed letter is finally being delivered. And the tree of life that was planted in the drought of your waiting, it is already beginning to grow. If you are receiving this word, write in the comments right now. It was never withheld. It was held for me. Send this to someone who believes their delay means God changed his mind. They need to hear this today. And if this message strengthened your spirit in the waiting, stay connected here. Words that hold you up in the hard seasons, they are coming. And the next one just might carry exactly what your spirit will need. We rise together, always.